Behind this tree line over here is the Drayton Lakes RSPB reserve, and that used to be a quarry, hence there's some big holes in there. In these trenches, they found ditches and pits and things that were associated with a Roman villa. Basically, we're targeting our trenches using all of this information. There's no hypercourse or anything like that. There's no underfloor heating. There's no masonry. But otherwise, we've got all the indicators of a villa.
No mosaics.
No mosaics, unfortunately. I'd love to find a mosaic, but we haven't found any here.
What we're doing here is a small public excavation. It's part of a series of investigation that the Archaeological Unit's running in conjunction with the Ouse Washes program, which is a Heritage Lottery funded program running for 3 years.
The idea is to do a community dig with as many volunteers as we can get on site. We were highly oversubscribed. We had over 70 volunteers apply. We've ended up with about 7 or 8 people a day, with most people being here for 3 days or more.
And because you're dealing with something like a Roman villa, you're getting a wide range of very nice finds. The archaeology is quite clear, so it's a very good in terms of a learning experience.
You just had it in your hand. I think it's stone? Ah, boo, I thought we had discovery. When you promise someone a Roman villa, it really sparks the imagination in people, because you know that you will find things, you know that you will find pottery, and you will find bits of tile and bits of things that people used centuries and centuries ago. And there's still that romanticism around discovery that people are really attracted to.
This is the sort of thing I do on my holidays. I take whatever opportunities to dig actually come along.
It looks good. It's very nice and vertical, that edge. The other side is less so.
I've found some Roman pottery and some animal bones. We think it's a sheep or goat's leg bone. We do feel it's like it's a contribution, although it's a very small contribution. But there's small steps. Everybody's contribution will come together to make a contribution to knowledge of this area.
We can tell that this was a high status, most likely villa. Amongst other finds, we found glass, and if you look at the bubbles, it's indication that is a late Roman glass. We also found a Roman coin. It is mid 4th century. The emperor here is a Valentinian. Basically, we can tell that this site was late Roman period.
One of the things we've had a number of sites with very large bird bone assemblages. Some of the birds we're talking about in this capacity are things like Dalmatian pelican, which is now extinct. And you're dealing with a bird with an over 3-meter wingspan. Its body would be the size of a sheep. Now, one of the things we're particularly doing here is we're sieving the deposits. This isn't common anymore in archaeology, but we're particularly doing it here because we want to look at the degree of how important birds were in the domestic economy of the villa.
Archaeology is something that you can learn really quickly. It is something that is a skill, and it does take a little time to work out what is bone, what is pot, and what is a stone. For the first couple of days that volunteers on site, we spend a lot of time with them trying to go through what they found. But it tends to take a day or two before people really get their eyes in and they start seeing bone as bone and pottery as pottery, and as soon as they can do that, they can basically dig. Archaeology is a discipline in which you can make mistakes, and you will learn from those mistakes, sometimes more information than if you do everything absolutely perfectly. Exactly what you've been doing. You've been doing it right, don't worry. Okay. You're right. Fantastic.
We're here in one of the great hubs of the fen. We're at the foot of the Bedford level, the drainage channels that were first started in 1630, and nestled between its barrier banks is this star-shaped Civil War fort built in the 1640s, probably by the parliamentarian forces. What is interesting is when you see from the air the layout of the landscape here, you have the sort of absolute geometries of the star-shaped forts and the great lines of the two barriers of the Bedford level and the channel running out to the sea. This is the area where the river Great Ouse, in terms of prehistory and Roman times, drained into the fens prior to this post-medieval drainage. There would have been many different courses of the river, many different islands. We've been, for the last few weeks, through the Ouse Washes programs, exploring and test trenching one of the sides of the main channels here, which has shown up some really startling results.
We haven't got anything in this trench that's necessarily Civil War, but we have got 6,000 years of fantastic archaeology, where each one of these soil deposits that we've been working with tells a different story and allows us to understand the change in both the environment and the character of the landscape. I'm standing at the moment inside of an Iron Age ditch. It's from the late Iron Age, about 200 BC, so almost 2,500 years old. And the sort of things that we're getting out of this are pottery, bones, burnt stones, flint, all the things that people would have utilised in their daily lives. And that illustrates that on the top of this plateau, we've got quite a significant Iron Age settlement, a community living here 2,000 years ago. So we can start to walk into this basin where we've been excavating. And these soil layers right underneath the modern day topsoil are starting to get thicker and thicker. These reddish grey horizons just here. These are jam-packed full of archaeology from 4000 BC all the way through to the beginning of the Roman period. The communities living on the plateau are pulling their ploughs right up to this scarp edge, part of their agricultural world. And as the plough turns on the scarp edge, it pushes up the soil, leaving this slightly raised elevation. And we call this either a headland or just an agricultural ridge. Out of here, we're finding flint work. These beautiful, very fine and thin and sharp Neolithic worked tools. This illustrates that this would have been dry land. Somewhere out towards the far end of our trench is where the River Ouse would have been situated. So we're in the lowest part of the trench, quite a bit different to what we saw further up in the drier parts of the trench. And the reason these have preserved so well is exactly because of this, the water. The water has made the environment of a particular type that does not allow the oxygen in to feed all of those microbes and little critters that eat away at the organic component that in this stuff has survived fantastically well. We've got a whole series of, oh look at that, fantastic, these reeds that have survived. These are probably 3,000 years old, if not older. It's incredible to think that this stuff survives as well as it does. And all of this material is going to give us some sort of sense as to what the environment on this part of the shoreline, as clearly it was in the Bronze Age, really looked and felt for people living there. Fantastic. So we've been able to see this fantastic prehistoric landscape with this very dramatic drop in the fens. This is a massive drop as far as this sort of place goes. But at a certain point in time it's become inundated, it's become masked by a complete change in the environment, a much wetter sort of place, and the growth of that peat formation. But it's really interesting that as a result of that 17th century activity, the drainage of the fens with these vast drains either side of this landscape, and perhaps the activities taking place in the Bulwark, once again those peats have shrunk and this landscape has become a major feature of this particular part of Earith. Who would have thought?